The Eternals are immensely powerful, essentially immortal beings, so where were they while Thanos was cutting the population of the universe in half? There could be a very valid reason why these heroes didn't show up during Infinity War and Endgame. One big, huge, glaring obvious reason for not including the Eternals in the Infinity Saga is because, well, we were already kinda maxed out in terms of characters. Captain Marvel made $1 billion, and they couldn't even fit her into Endgame for much longer than it took to show off her new haircut. Having such a massive cast contributed to the success of Infinity War and Endgame, but having too many characters to a film can just be too much. I'm looking at you, Spider-Man 3. Did you really need to trot out Peter Parker's whole world gallery, huh? But not wanting to overload the movies with too many characters is a more behind-the-scenes type of problem. This meta take on the movies doesn't explain story-wise why the Eternals didn't show up at any point during Thanos' quest for the Infinity Stones. These characters are incredibly powerful and nearly immortal. So what's their excuse for not pitching in when things got tough on a cosmic scale? This might not have much to do with the Eternals themselves and everything to do with their creators. Although we learned a little bit about the Celestials via the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, they're still pretty mysterious as far as their role in the MCU is concerned. We know Eason the Searcher used the Power Stone to mow down entire civilizations like wheat in a field, according to the Collector, and that nowhere is located on the severed head of a Celestial. That must have been an interesting real estate ad, huh? And of course, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 introduced us to the Celestial Ego, the living planet, who gave us a look at the massive power these beings commanded. Saying that Ego wasn't a warm and fuzzy guy is a bit of an understatement, and it's possible he and his fellow Celestials had something to do with why we haven't seen the Eternals in action yet. Ego wasn't the only Celestial who, let's say, tampered with other species. In the comics, the Celestials were responsible for creating the Eternals, as well as their enemies, the Deviants. The MCU version of Thanos is a Titan, but in the comics he was an eternal deviant mutant hybrid, too hideous for his own mother to love. Okay, I know that sounds mean, but I'm not making it up. Let's just say it's not surprising that Thanos didn't end up being the best parent himself. The Celestials are responsible for creating the Eternals, and they may also be the reason they were conspicuously absent during the Infinity Saga. Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige claims the Eternals movie will fill in some gaps in the MCU's history. So I'm assuming we're going to get some info on the Celestials. We've even seen some early concept art of one as part of the promotional material for the film. Now, the Celestials aren't all inherently evil, but they're infinitely more powerful than us tiny humans. This means they have no problem messing with our lives when the mood strikes them, and that they don't exactly have vested interest in how we're doing, which pretty much means the decimation was always just a minor blip as far as they're concerned. Basically, humans are just a bunch of dysfunctional playthings as far as the Celestials are concerned, even the ones with superpowers. And these self-centered Celestials don't want anyone interfering with their toys, which means they could have forbidden the Eternals from interfering in human affairs. The Celestials like to sit back and watch things play out to see how humans will react to different things without any kind of input, so they can sit back and judge how we're doing. Our whole lives are basically an episode of Judge Judy as far as they're concerned, and we all know how she feels about being interrupted. Don't get me wrong, the Eternals are incredibly powerful, but the Celestials are on a whole nother level in addition to being their creators. If the Celestials told them to sit back and relax during the Infinity Saga, then that's probably what they were doing instead of stepping in. Don't get me wrong. As you've probably guessed by now, the Celestials aren't exactly the forgiving sort. As one Eternal named Gilgamesh learned the hard way, he couldn't resist being a hero to humans, and as a result he ended up being banished and shunned by his fellow Eternals. They even started him calling the Forgotten One just to highlight the fact that the Celestials were not speaking to him. Considering how powerful the Celestials are, an Eternal silent treatment is actually a relatively minor punishment, so no wonder the other Eternals would prefer to obey rather than risk their wrath. It's also possible that the person enforcing the Celestials' decree is one of their own. In the comics, Zurus is the leader of the Celestials, and anyone who doesn't like the way he runs things is free to go off in outer space, which some did and ended up settling on Titan, but that's a whole nother story. Zurus was the one who handed down the punishment for Gilgamesh, and it wouldn't be surprising if there's a leader among the Eternals when they join the MCU. Although we haven't seen Zurus on the cast list, we know Game of Thrones star Richard Madden is portraying the Eternals' Icarus. It's possible that he will take on a leadership role in the film and be responsible for enforcing the decree set forth by the Celestials. It's also possible that Icarus and the other Eternals may have known about the Infinity Stones all along. There's also Ajax, who actress Selma Hayek has described as kind of a leader. However, she elaborated that she's more of a motherly role in their lives, and that they're all connected as more of a family than anything else. In the comics, Ajak was an Eternal who didn't side with Zurus and ventured out into outer space instead. She could convince the Eternals not to interfere with some good old-fashioned motherly nagging, or perhaps Icarus could use some of his considerable power. More likely it's the combination of the two and the possibility of punishment that keeps the Eternals in line. Unless something big happens, which I'm guessing it will at some point in the movie. The blip could have also played a part in the current leadership of the Eternals. They certainly seem to qualify as life in the universe, so presumably some of them disappeared for 5 years. While that's a short amount of time for an Eternal, those that remained presumably thought they were gone for good. They might be adjusting to the blip and the fact that they said goodbye to some of their friends, just like the humans of the MCU. While we saw Thanos gathering up the stones during Infinity War, there seemed to be a surprising number of them on planet Earth. The universe is a big place, so why were half of them on Earth? Sure, the Mind Stone was there because of Loki messing up his mission during the Avengers, but the Space Stone and the Time Stone were there long before that, which means 1/3 of the stones had been on Earth for quite some time. Maybe it's not a coincidence that so many of the ultra-powerful Infinity Stones, once wielded by Celestials, ended up on a planet populated by Eternals. There's also the idea that the Eternals could have been responsible for hiding the Infinity Stones in the first place. After all, they have incredibly long lives, and their standalone film will give us a glimpse at the MCU's history. We could have finally have explanation for who thought it was a good idea to hide the Space Stone in a church in Norway. Thanos' comic book connection to the Eternals could also explain how the MCU version of the Mad Titan managed to track down the Mind Stone prior to the Avengers. It's even possible that the Mind Stone was also on Earth this whole time. It's possible that the Celestials like the idea of having some of their potential weapons and their loyal subjects in the same place. Or perhaps they originally intended for the Eternals to use the Infinity Stones at some point. And when Thanos started snatching up the stones, they may have just been content to see where he was going with all this, and whether or not our heroes would be able to stop him. Now that the Infinity Stones have been destroyed, it's possible that the Celestials may have more use for the Eternals than ever before. Since they can't use the Infinity Stones to help do their bidding, an army of Eternals is pretty much the next best thing. This could end up being a major conflict in the movie, if some Eternals are fine with following the Celestials' plan while others choose to rebel. Maybe the fact that the Eternals were part of their fallback plan is why the Celestials themselves didn't interfere during Infinity War, and why they ordered the Eternals to stay out of it. Since the Eternals have likely been around for quite some time, they probably remember Gilgamesh being punished for getting too friendly with humans and aren't eager to repeat his mistakes. Icarus could be leading the Eternals and enforcing a rule about not interfering with humankind. This would explain why they didn't step up during Infinity War and Endgame, or at any other point in MCU history. But it's possible that the Eternals we're going to see in the MCU simply didn't care enough to step in at any point. Even though the Eternals have amazing powers, some of them just plain old aren't interested in fighting. In the comics, Sersi was a member of the Avengers, but after taking some time off for her mental health and then having her memory erased, she became a socialite in New York City. Even when she regained her memory and remembered being an ultra-powerful superhero, she preferred to stick with her new way of living. Hey, if we learned one thing from Tony Stark, is that having access to powers isn't enough to make someone a hero. Like Sersi, Kingo is an Eternal who has adapted well to hiding in plain sight on Earth. In the comics, he was a Japanese film star, but in the MCU, he'll be a major Bollywood actor who doesn't have time in his busy schedule to worry about the Mad Titan. We also have Phastos, an Eternal who can create incredible weapons and inventions, but isn't the biggest fan of actually using them in battle. There's no need to question why he didn't step up during the Infinity Saga, because he doesn't want to take part in any kind of fighting. Even when he was forced to take part in a battle with the Deviants, he took on the name Ceasefire, so everyone would know that he really didn't want to be there. You kind of have to admire his commitment to apathy. There will be other Eternals in the movie, of course. Each one will likely have their own reason for staying on the down low instead of taking on a career as a superhero. Some fans think this supposedly leaked Eternals logo hints at the influence the Celestials have on their lives in the MCU. This design looks like a timepiece with 17 different symbols. They could be a part of a new language, or even each one could represent something in the film. One idea is that they could indicate the Eternals, but having such a low number of them in total seems unlikely. But considering their power, having 17 Celestials in the MCU would still be a pretty high number. This could point to the Celestials being a major part of the Eternals movie and having a big impact on the lives of the characters. Maybe even big enough for them to stand back while a giant purple lunatic wipes out half of all life in the universe. But after experiencing the decimation and the loss of some of Earth's greatest heroes, how long can they sit by and do nothing? The Eternals' connection to the Celestials is something I definitely like to see incorporated into their film. What are your predictions for the Eternals and how they'll fit into the MCU? Share them with us in the comments and click subscribe for more from CBR. Bye for now.